We have been discussing quite a bit today how the role of impact data in companies is changing quite significantly, both due to stakeholder demands, but also regulatory requirements. So how have you personally perceived the role of impact and sustainability change in the past 5 years?
Okay, so how I perceive the change of sustainability and regulation, kind of, if you think of the general awareness around sustainability has increased a lot, which is great. So people realize that there's a climate crisis, there's biodiversity loss ongoing, and these kind of awareness raising results in demands to businesses and companies, be it then from the insurance companies, investors, consumers, employees, etc. And then when these kind of stakeholder groups start putting pressure or expectation to companies start to realize, hey, this might be a risk to the business, or even better, this might be an opportunity to us. So now thinking back maybe plus 5 years or so, the sustainability teams and functions were more or less on their own, working in their corner on sustainability strategies and figuring out how do we measure net impact, how do we disclose on climate, etc., and all of these. I'm sure it was great stuff, and I was part of those people, but now kind of the company is really realizing that this has a business impact. It starts to embed into the corporate strategy, so not separate sustainability strategies, but one corporate strategy where sustainability is key and in the core, and that's of course the only way how things really change. I'm not saying that it's perfect yet, but there's clearly a trend towards that. Now the question on regulation and how that has changed, I feel kind of earlier regulation was maybe the driving force, so companies wanted to comply, of course still want to comply, but if then there was a proposal from the legislator for a new stricter regulation, usually the companies opposed, so we don't want any stricter regulation, this costs money, etc. And this has changed, so there are forerunner companies who even ask for stricter regulation. So kind of the businesses are taking the lead in developing sustainability to a new level. Now, having said that and understanding what's going on in the EU with all the different legislative requirements, it's not only the businesses taking the lead. Regulation is also changing a lot and getting more demanding. So I would say at least in the EU it's both and. But still there are ways for how forerunner companies can do more than required by legislation. Now then again, thinking of the past 5 years, one can't kind of ignore COVID and the impact on that. And I must say, at least myself, when the pandemic started and all of was kind of blurry and unclear, I was really afraid that, hey, now this great momentum of acting on climate, and now talking of the company, so Cargotec, where I work for, kind of we had great initiatives and great actions, and I was like, okay, what's going to happen? Do we go back to the kind of old polluting way of doing things? But I must say that at least from my end, I don't think that happened. If you think of COP26, it happened. It was really a success, even though a bit later than planned, and also companies proceeding. And I think also this platform launch is a great evidence that even though there was COVID and made things more difficult, things have progressed.
That's good to hear. Good to hear.
Could you pass the mic to Mika? I have a next question. Actually building on Päivi's point, so the impact topics come in more and more also to kind of on the table of executive teams. So you're CEO of Lamor, so why do you care about impact as a CEO, and how has it been visible in your work?
Why does any CEO care about financial data? I think my approach is exactly the same. And if you look at this landscape, how it has evolved in the past, a lot of these ESG reporting standards were used to justify the current business model and sort of greenwashing that. All right, we are doing this, and it has very little impact on the environment, and that sort of blindfolded a lot of companies from the fact that the landscape and the global economy is really changing a lot. And I think these sort of initiatives in order to quantify the impact that the company has also helps top executives, top management to evaluate how the current business model is fitted for that change. So I think this type of modeling gives you an idea of how sustainable your business model actually is in the future. And as the CEO, I'm all about the future and not just trying to maintain the status quo, but trying to find ways and trying to fit in the change into our strategy that we will be relevant for years to come.
Very, very good points. A bit building on that to Cecilia. So we have a lot of these frameworks nowadays. Different frameworks capture different things. And one of the problems that we've been trying to solve is that some of the more narrow and traditional ESG measuring systems don't capture all the impact that different kinds of businesses have. And I think this is also a case for your company. So could you tell me a bit, or us a bit more about what is missing at the moment?
That's a very good question, thank you. Yeah, for us as a service company, it's been a journey, I think, with these different standards and the rating agencies that are looking at us, because they are not modeled normally for service companies. They're modeled by manufacturing companies. And then we don't fit into their squares very good. So that has been a challenge for us. And also not always, yes, they are objective, but there are sometimes, they look at maybe media information that is, I don't even know sometimes where they find it, I must say. And then you have to defend yourself from information that is not really relevant. So for us, as Annie mentioned, science-based is really positive for us, I would say, and also that it is objective, that you look at all this data and you find this data about us, and we see it in a very clear format, and also the what is really important for us, like the social part. We're a big company, we have nearly 350,000 employees around the world. So for us, that's really important. We create many jobs, and that's clearly shown then in the net impact model. And also we pay taxes where we operate. Our climate impact is not huge. It's shown, but it's not maybe our biggest negative impact. So that's also really interesting for us to be able to show that in a good way.
Yeah, indeed. A bit building on that, so feel free also others to chime in, but in this current discussion, there's typically a lot of talk about what happens inside the company, some talk about what happens upstream, but not that much about what happens downstream. So how are you perceiving it, and how are you bringing to life or bringing to the knowledge of the people these downstream impacts that your companies are able to create, and what is done with your products and services and what kind of impact that has?
I think that's a very good question, and I think when it comes to looking at your business model from sustainability perspective, it's all about the client at the end of the day. It's all about how your products and services are used by your clients, and we believe that being able to quantify to our client that how do we impact actually their operations gives us a unique selling point that's not being utilized at the moment that much. I mean, I was just walking here and I received my weekly order from the duopoly, as we call it here in Finland, and I was thinking that when I order those groceries for 1 week, why don't I get the data on what is actually the sort of impact of the groceries that I buy, that I could actually make a comparison between using one of the chains that works in a more sustainable manner. And I think that same applies to our clients. I mean, we work with a lot of the oil and gas companies, with port operators, with governmental agencies, and being able to show and quantify the good that we do for those supposedly bad guys, I think that would give us a unique selling point. And I think that sort of mindset should be adopted by the top management as well.
Yeah, maybe for us, since we produce huge steel-based products for moving cargo, so really big ones, terminal tractors and reach stackers. And for us, kind of the impact of the use of our products is so huge, especially if looking at the carbon footprint, that we can't ignore it. But in a way, I think it's lucky, in a good thing, because usually that kind of drives the business when you're able to kind of say that we are supporting our customer at the same time we can develop our products to be more efficient or have a lower kind of carbon footprint, and that then helps us to reduce our emissions. So it's I agree that it's many times left out, but in our case, kind of looking at scope 3 upstream, so the impact of sourcing is much more difficult to get data on than actually the downstream usage of our products.
Maybe like to ask from Markus, you represent the voice of investors here, so you've been using impact data from Upright, but also probably other sustainability data a lot. So how do you look at the impact of companies more broadly and in your work?
Well, first of all, happy to be here and joining this panel today. When it comes to investors and impact data, of course, investors need to think about a lot of things when assessing companies, analyzing companies. But one thing is for sure understanding the value creation of companies. This is something that companies typically report in their sustainability reports, but it's not really easy to compare. You know, they do some visual things on it and it looks nice. And so I think impact data really helps here, because the more, let's say, traditional ESG data focuses more on how things are done and not on what is really, you know, at least not of the sustainability outcomes or impacts of what's being done. So it provides certainly another lens to investors. And we came across Upright in the early days, a couple of years ago, and we were really excited from start, because also the coverage issue is one thing, because when investing in looking at smaller companies and micro companies, it can really be hard you are struggling with getting the data because the companies themselves are not reporting, and so we really like the feature that these metrics can be applied to really any size of a company. So,
yeah, thanks for sharing. And a follow-up question, and anybody can answer. So also Erkki was talking about reporting on the opportunities, and you mentioned that often the value creation is something like pictures on the business model, whereas the risk side reporting is like facts and figures. So any thoughts that how should or how could the opportunity side reporting unfold in the future? Is it like concrete figures on just your company or something more comparable?
Well, first of all, I think it's super good to see and hear what's going on with the reporting standards that Mr. Liikanen was discussing about some consolidation going on in the background. So getting the alphabet soup a bit clearer, I think is one good starting point. But I think there will be, and maybe it's not a bad thing, that there is some room for companies themselves also telling the story that they want to tell, because to some extent it's also in their hands what, you know, it's their company, but and then let's say investors are then you know, making the decision based on the available information.
It's always dangerous to start with "I have a dream," but let's try it. What I'd like to see in the future is that you can really build a sensitivity analysis on the hugely positive net impact products and services that you create and the profitability of those products and services that you offer. And I think that is the future, that you are able to communicate to your stakeholders, not only investors but larger stakeholders, that it is actually these extremely positive net impact solutions, services, products that drive the profitability. And that is the dream that we have, that we can really quantify the things that we do and how does that affect our profitability. So creating the link between the financial reporting and the sustainability reporting.
And do you also think that this should be part of your, you are a CEO, should this be part of your incentive schemes and the incentive schemes of other executives in the future?
I think we already had an agreement that these net impact should affect your multiples. So I think it should be embedded there.
Very good.
Cecilia, you were about to comment on the previous.
Yeah, no, I think it's very good that we're looking at the impact, the positive and the negative impact, and not only the risk. That is, as you talked about, the value creation and not only risk, actually, because I think it's too much focus on that and not the companies, as you say, telling their story and showing what they actually bring to the world around them.
Yeah. We still have a couple of minutes, so I would love to use your brain on our product development, as we have fantastic people here on stage. So you've now seen that what are kind of the lenses on the Upright platform, and which we want to bring very transparently on the SDGs, EU taxonomy, net impact. What should be the next lens on the Upright platform? So talking about the impact more broadly, like what kind of another lens would you like to see or have hundreds of companies disclose?
Yeah, maybe building on what Cecilia said on the positives and thinking of the transition journey towards a 1.5 degree society and company, kind of would be really interesting to use that lens to see what is actually then the net impact on that journey or the activities. So not looking, of course it should have a good impact on the greenhouse gas emissions, but what else is there? So using that kind of view for the whole net impact analysis, even though also first thinking, well, isn't this enough with the 6 months? But you're right, there's probably more that you can add to it.
We started with Annu's slides about the emissions and emissions reporting, and maybe do a real comparison of your model and the emissions reported by the company itself. I don't believe in much of the emission reporting done by the companies. It is simulational at best. There's not much efforts done to really measure the real emissions. At worst, it is fully based on taxonomy or way of calculating emissions. So you might be using something that creates a lot of pollution or a lot of emissions, but on paper that's zero emission. So looking at the actual data reported and how you model, and then I know that you are in the board of Inderes, so maybe it would be great to see your data on the analyst reports that Inderes is providing. So maybe there's some possibility for cross-fertilization there as well.
And just a brief comment on this. I think for investors, anything that is forward-looking is probably something that's really wanted, because any analysis or scores or ratios based on, at least to some extent, on historical data or reported data or something, you know, it's old already when it's published. And maybe something capturing also the direction of the development in some way, some sort of like a, let's say, call it a trend indicator or something like this, because I think investors want to know where the company is in 5 years and not what it was 5 years ago, that much at least.
Let me build on that great idea. And forward-looking model could be based on the investments that the company is doing, and then you model it as per the products that you already have. So maybe there is something cooking there.
That's very good. I think there's something for us to do for the next couple of months then.
Yeah.
I don't know if my mic is on or not, but to that idea, we've been discussing a lot, because now the first step is to bring the targets there, but just as the companies themselves say it. But our secret, or not that secret dream anymore, is that we will also build them into, like, not just say that you say we will become a green company, but say, okay, what will that look like in terms of like your core business, your products and services, and their energy levels and so on, in which way we can then model it and then show the development for the investors, pretty much just like you suggested. So thank you for giving us great next items on our table. Yeah.
I think that's a good transition also to the Q&A. So thanks a lot for very insightful comments. And now I think if the audience has questions to the panelists, we'd like to hear that. I can try to transition the mic, but maybe also it's might be easier if you just shout it and then we repeat it, so also the remote participants will hear the questions. Oh, well, this is so close that the mic can move easily.
Hi, Anssi Mikola from River Recycle. We're a company that exists to clean rivers of plastic waste so that we don't get plastic in the ocean. And my question is really probably more to the Upright team. What's the situation on measuring biodiversity? What's the amount of money we're saving by saving a ton of plastic going to the ocean? Where's the biodiversity measurement moving?
Great question. The biodiversity has been one of the impacts in the Upright grid, as you probably know very well, for the past 4.5 years, and that's definitely one that is probably the hottest when just now, like talking on behalf of our data team, that we're now looking into needs to get more and more attention. Like in general, we've seen the emission discussion going more and more towards the biodiversity discussion, and I think our methodologies, what we basically do right now is, of course, look at all the products and services, look at the scientific information of them and map it there. But I think, personally, I think that's one of the areas where we most need to develop next, given the critical nature of biodiversity data also for investors coming forward. If you have any concrete ideas, would love to discuss that with you, potentially offline as well.
Will do. There's also building on Mika's comment. Lamor is making some of the machinery with which we're removing the plastics.
Right.
If that could count it into what they do, it would be a really nice piece of information.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Any other brave people from the audience? You can also just shout out, and then Valtteri and I can repeat what has come there. Maybe before we wait for the live audience to become even more braver, should we ask Toni? You've been now, together with Tuukka and some of your other colleagues, you've been having a secret discussion that all of us here live know nothing about. So would you, Toni, like to bring a couple of questions or comments from our virtual participants from all over Europe, and I guess some from all over the world as well, to the stage?
Yes. I'm not sure, can you hear me? Yes, you can. Thank you, Annu.
You can also come here on stage if you are not feeling too shy.
Well, maybe I can. If I remember the question, I had it there. But
you can also take your laptop with you.
Well, I don't have it here now, but we've had a great discussion also on the virtual platform. There's like 100 questions more coming in. Please keep them coming. One question was related to your discussion also, that Upright platform, the comment was first, congratulations. So good job, Annu, and the team.
No, come on, good job, you guys.
Yeah, but then
I did not do
it was mentioned that the platform is great for capturing the environmental impacts. But how about the social impacts? How do we capture them with the net impact model? So I think this was more intended to the Upright team than the panelists, but I don't know, Annu, if you want to go ahead.
You can answer yourself. You are probably the best person to answer it. How do we measure the societal impacts?
Yeah, sure. So as you know, with the Upright net impact model, in addition to environment, we also measure impact on society, health of people, and knowledge. And you could consider the health of people and impact on society, social impacts. So the net impact model, it's all about measuring the net sum of costs and gains, whether they are social or environmental or something else. So that's the short answer to that question.
And maybe just to be a bit more granular, when it comes to society as such, we look at the traditional stuff like jobs and taxes, like many of you saw in the demo before, but also stuff like societal infrastructure. And if you're wondering why this matters and why we're doing this, it's essentially to put companies like, well, Cargotec, Securitas, Lamor, basically all of the companies we've been discussing today, their operations of what they are using the emissions for. We need to put that in context of the societal impacts. So even if you think that emissions are the only thing that matters, which is a valid opinion right now, given the climate situation we're in, even to answer that question smartly, you need to understand the values created in other categories, because we are not the minuses that we're causing in the environment categories are because of pluses in other categories. There's no inherent value of the environment doesn't really need us to produce energy. We need it for our societal needs. So that's why it's crucially important to measure also the other categories, even if your main interest would be with climate, which is a very valid viewpoint these days. Any other questions from the audience? Let's see if I bounce it back to you again.
Yeah, well, there were many other questions. One comment was about the number of public companies and how much are we going to publish. Do you want to share a bit about what are our aims on the open access impact platform, and how many companies will there be now and in the future?
Yeah, well, given what we've been doing in the past 4.5 years and building this insane technologies to actually get this product information, get these product scientific models on the products, we wouldn't do it if we were only satisfied with 700 companies. We probably would have done the 700 faster just by hand in this time. So our outrageous promise and aim that we're actually serious about and not just throwing startup-y way things around is that we will cover basically 95% of all companies with more than 10 employees globally with this technology. It doesn't mean that every mining company from India even knows about Upright. It doesn't even matter if they don't know about us. The point is that we collect their information automatically, we bring them to the platform and allow anyone to compare this information. This is not just to be like a startup and say big numbers. This is because we believe this is part of the MVP of changing the discussion. We cannot really truly take impact data further if it's only available for a couple of elite companies. But we need companies who are proactive, like these guys on stage right now, and a lot of others who are volunteering this data, working together with us to make it as high quality as possible. Was that the right answer?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes,
good.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent. Any other questions from the audience, or are you ready to move on? Another question from the same gentleman. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question to Markus. Now, impact funds have been quite successful compared to many other funds. Do you see a direct correlation between the Upright project measurements and the financial results? And how do you explain that, if you can?
We also at Aktia, we run a dedicated impact strategy, so a little bit thinking about that product. I think it's really not that easy to say, claim a correlation in all market conditions, because a lot of stuff is happening in the world, and at one point one asset class will overperform or outperform. And I guess we are not, we don't have a long enough track to really make that sort of claims. But certainly in the current market environment, some of the key themes in, let's say, our impact strategy, those being, for example, microfinance, renewable energy, they have performed really well.
Thank you.
Maybe if you may, just a comment on that, because this is obviously something we discuss every day with our clients. My view on that is, and of course we also do a lot of playing around with our data, because we have the impact data for thousands of funds and portfolios, and of course our tens of thousands actually, and companies and so on. So of course we are very curiously monitoring all the time, how does the financial performance and the impact performance go, whether they go hand in hand. And we've done some really interesting, let's put it this way, just put it very softly here, interesting insights in terms of how the two are coming more and more together. However, our stance here is not like, if they were already completely aligned, we wouldn't be needed, this impact data would not be needed, the market would already be taking care of the problem. What we believe is that the information is not yet well enough available so that even investors would know what makes financial sense for them to do, how are consumer behaviors going to change because of this kind of data. And that's why this process needs to be accelerated, and it's exactly like collaborations like this, like Aktia, for example, using our data or some other impact data that is accelerating the change. Perfect. I think now is a really good time to give a big warm. I at least enjoyed the discussion a lot. Thank you so much for coming here and also giving your faces to the transparency of impact data that smart companies are doing way much more than what is required from them. So let's give a warm thank you to Päivi, Cecilia, Mika and Markus.